This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. When you give your attention to someone, full attention, I believe something magical happens. It resonates. There's a connection going on there. And that's our starting point today, attention. Where does it come from? How do you bolster it? How do you increase attention for somebody, even, dare I say, giving attention to yourself? This is all part of therapy. And interestingly, she is a therapist, but an art therapist, something radically different, but covers all of the many of the traditional things that challenges us. Great to have her back. Our professional of the year, Barbara Robertson, is on the program. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks, Steve. That was a great introduction to kind of where I want to go today. And I'll sort of give our viewers and listeners a little bit of a heads up. It is all about attention and the value of attention and the connection that I've been kind of seeing more and more clearly between making art, paying attention, and acting out of love. And the three of those things seem more and more, the older I get, to be very closely intertwined. So let me jump in, and feel free to challenge me at any point or jump on if it reminds you of anything or if you have a different take on it. Let's just kind of go exploring a little bit. So when I first had an opportunity to kind of talk to a larger group about what I do as an art therapist and about how I really would love it if everyone could just so comfortably embrace their own creativity. And I know that's not true for a lot of people. But where I wanted to start is that art materials are actually instruments of love. Art materials are things that we can enact a loving action with. And I say that because when we are creating artwork, whether it's 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions, whatever material we're working with, we're paying attention to the medium that we're working with, to the ideas that inspire us, to the sense of wanting to create something tangible that reflects something that mattered to us. And I think that it has to do with recognizing that attention is also a manifestation of love.
Ooh, there's one to process. All right, let's back up before we get there.
Okay.
When you give somebody's attention, when you give somebody your attention, are you expecting anything in return? Like you say, usually when we manifest something, we're looking for something. So manifesting love. I'm trying to make the connection between attention and that.
I think that, I mean, if we're looking for anything, it's a sense of authentic connection, a sense of seeing and witnessing another person as they are, as openly as they're capable of sharing their essential self with us, and as openly as we're capable of sharing our essential self with them.
I want to share something with you because it's coming up in my mind.
Okay, jump in.
I believe the secret to attention or giving somebody attention is tapping the brakes on your life. Why do I say that? I don't know if I shared this last time we got together, but in the last week and a half, I've slowed it down a little bit. Had a little bit of a cold almost 2 weeks ago, a week and a half and change. And I took vitamin C 2 days in a row. It went away. I'm like, I'm grateful. That was the quickest cold I ever had. Like literally nothing on the second to third day. Nothing. I was like, oh,
Whoa.
I was waiting for it to
Yeah.
come back. Never did.
Nice.
But it caused me in the beginning there to slow down a little bit. But then I continued to slow down. And not to say that I didn't hang with friends and do a little this, a little that, but I was very careful about it and spent more time at home, chilling, hanging with the dog, thinking, reflecting. But here's what came from that. I would go to a store and, somebody holds the door for you or you hold the door for them. And the normal me would be, well, thank you very much. And I just walk in. Now I find myself staring in their eyes for an extra eighth of a second,
Okay.
quarter of that, and just say thank you. And like you said before, making a connection. And I know this sounds very minimal, but I'm living a different life by just tapping the brakes a little
Yes.
bit. And I guess
Yes.
giving attention where it's due. And you got to, that's maybe another topic there. Careful about who you give your attention to.
Oh,
But,
sure. Yeah.
but even in that just minor moment, if you will, of just a stranger passing through, actually making a connection with their eyes. And I don't mean in a creepy way, just,
No,
looking.
just a quick sort of eye to eye acknowledgement.
That's
Oh, I
it.
see you. You're here. That was kind. Yeah.
Acknowledgement. Exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
that's what, and I wrote this down that quiet is the beginning of the cure.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And I think, part of how this came to me is I was thinking about the idioms that we use. And what we use with attention, we will often say pay attention.
Ooh.
So if we're paying attention, then attention must be some kind of currency because we pay with currency. We pay with something that has value. Currency is just a paper that has a symbolic value of, monetary worth, but worth can be measured in all sorts of ways. So, what that says to me is that there's an implicit acknowledgement in the way that our language developed that our attention carries value to others. And as we pay attention, as we give currency to someone else, like you did by looking in the eyes of the person who was kind to you, we're acknowledging their value.
Hmm.
It's not as crass as giving a tip would be, for example, like when the Uber driver or whoever taxi driver, you can still tip taxi driver. I guess you're not supposed to tip Uber and Lyft, but if you tip a taxi driver for getting your luggage out of the trunk, that's a way of paying a gratuity, showing, a concrete form of gratitude, but our attention is another version of doing that.
Hmm. Well, framing the language, and by the way, you talk about pay attention. Everything has a cost in life, I
Right.
believe. But where do you hear pay attention? It's usually somebody asking you to give it. How many parents will say, hey, pay attention, pay attention. But if you flip it around, somebody could say, Barbara, I want to give you my attention. Can we do this in 5 minutes? I'll have more time. I want to give you my attention. No, but you never hear somebody say, Barbara, in 5 minutes from now, I'll have more time. I want to pay you my attention. You never hear
That's
it
true.
said that way.
That's true. We don't use it that way.
Right.
We don't use it overtly that way. And in a way, sort of for an adult, in a power imbalance relationship, like authority to,
Mm.
a sub person of some kind, whether it's a child or a student or an employee, pay attention means give me what you have of value.
It does when you look at it that way. And I guess you could say parent to child, teacher to student. You could say, can you please give me your attention? You could say that, but we don't. We say, pay attention. It's more of a demand
Yes,
than an
in
ask.
those circumstances, it certainly is.
Hmm.
But I just kind of, I'm inviting us to kind of think about how did that come into being in the first place? And then what does that say about us? And I think you're right when you say if you're giving someone your attention or giving something your attention, you're you're not in it about yourself. You're focusing outward on
Hmm.
something that might have somehow magnetically drawn your attention. Something about
Hmm.
it appealed to your senses in some way. But again, that's where that sort of underlying sense of love is, that when we give the value of our attention to something else, what that something else has already signaled to us is that there's something it's showing that we value,
Hmm.
that we already value.
Hmm. Never
And
thought of
so,
it that way. Yeah, because you
yeah,
wouldn't do it. You wouldn't give your attention unless there was a reason. If it's the person, you value the person. If it's the
right.
situation or the topic, you value that. Um, if you get pulled over by a police officer, you're providing attention at that moment because you value their authority. You also value less points on your license. There's a
Exactly.
reason.
Yes, and you value your hopes of charming the officer into giving you a warning or,
Mhm.
whatever the case may be. Yeah, I mean, even in sort of having to do tedious tasks on a job or for school, you value what that will ultimately lead to. So it may not be immediately that you just love doing Euclidean geometry, but you are going to love having earned the degree or passed the class.
There's value.
Yes, there's value in it. Hopefully, hopefully.
Hmm.
So when it comes to creating artwork, I don't want this to sort of undo what I've said in the past about how important play is,
Hmm.
which means not taking what you're doing too seriously and allowing yourself to just take an experimental approach to what you're doing, just trying something to see what happens and to see whether you like it or not. But the attention part is going to be part of that because when something happens that you like in whatever medium you're working with, you're going to feel a little spark of extra attention going to that. You're going to feel yourself responding to it. Ooh, look what I just did. Ooh, look how that color pops next to that other color. Ooh, that's so cool. I never expected that. And that's resonating because there's something in you that really likes that contrast,
Hmm.
that sort of room for opposites in the same place. And that, in artwork that might not be terribly significant, but if you want to sort of stretch that out into bigger life terms, it could mean that it's in tune with opposites attract, or with really enjoying when you meet somebody who's into something completely different from what you are, and their life just sounds fascinating, and you're so curious about what it would be like to do that.
How would you describe that attention in that somebody's life? You're like, well, that's interesting. Now you've, as they say, it piqued your attention, so you gave more there. But what's actually going on there?
Well, it can be hard to say, but I think curiosity is really one of the best gifts that we're endowed with as humans
Hmm.
because it really allows us to approach something that we don't know with an openness that helps us not to make a judgment about it too soon. before we really have a deeper sense of its character, its purpose, or, what it's like to do that.
I just got a download in my mind, and I'm sure you've heard this phrase: energy flows where the attention goes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And maybe that's the currency that attention has. Is we bring energy to a subject, whether that subject is another person. There was a great little TEDx talk I saw recently by an older woman who'd had to go out and get a job after retirement as a barista at a drive-in window in a coffee shop. And she approached the job initially, she said, and it was just so boring, and people were sort of grumpy because it was the morning and they hadn't had their coffee yet.
Mm.
And the whole thing was just grating on her nerves. And then something in her went, wait, there has to be a better way. And she got curious about what would make this feel better. And so she started to behave in a very friendly and empathetic way with everyone that came. So she started to say, I hope you have a better day than the start has been so far. Or, I hope this coffee just really hits you in a great place this morning. Or, now you've got your fuel. Hope it carries you through the rest of the day. Just something nice that she could think of saying, or maybe just even a smile. And she found that what was happening was the people who were sort of feeling edgy and grumpy, they visibly softened when she sort of gave them that little extra bit of attention.
Why don't people do that anyway? Like, I'm thinking about all those interactions. I'm at the window, I get my coffee, and they're very friendly.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with it.
Mm-hmm.
They gave attention to take a Sharpie and write something on the cup. Sometimes they write your name. They don't really do that as often anymore, but they might say enjoy or write it on the cup, which is great. They took
Yeah.
time to give you attention in that way. However, it wasn't really personalized. I'm just saying, if it's not your name, we get to spend
Right.
an hour before the store open and just write enjoy on the cup.
Right.
Have a nice day, whatever it is. And it's generic,
Right.
but at least there was some attention there. But imagine
Yeah.
if they hand you that cup of coffee through the window and just simply say, I hope you enjoy this.
Exactly.
I've like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know what to
Exactly.
say. Or, I made this just for you.
Yeah. The
What?
fun thing in this talk is that at the end of it, she said, what really surprised her was that at the end of a shift, she wasn't half as tired
Mm,
when she brought out the friendliness and she got paid back by their energy,
right.
replenishing hers. So I
Hmm.
thought that was pretty awesome to hear about.
You know, there's truth there. And we talk about money. It's paper, it's currency, it's backed up by gold, blah, 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 whatever.
Right.
All it is an energetic exchange. It doesn't
That's
even
right.
have to be money or paper. It could be here's a Kleenex. There, that's there. You put an
Right.
energetic exchange on it. And I remember somebody once did something for me. It was just a if I remember correctly, it was hypnotherapy. Somebody did a session, and I said, "Oh, well, thank you, impactful. How do I pay you?" No, it's on me. I'm like, I can't do that. So then they said, no, actually, what I need you to do is Venmo me $1. I'm like, $1? That's not even close to what it was worth. They said, it's on me. However, we need to do an exchange. So you will Venmo me $1. Thank you very much. I was like, all right, what's your Venmo handle? I'll do it. But it was the
Yeah.
exchange. So I think in the
Yes.
woman that you just
Yeah.
described, she was giving
Yep.
something. They were giving it back in terms of changing their demeanor at that moment.
Right. Right. And changing their internal energy in order to change their demeanor,
For sure.
which is really, really cool. And now
Mm.
there's one quick thing I want to get in there before our time runs out, and that is that we can also be attentive to what are we withholding our energy from? What are we not wanting to look at? What
Mm.
are we not wanting to feel? And then, as a way of bringing a deeper awareness to what it is that is beneath that need to avoid, we could bring our attention to the avoidance itself and say, okay, there's a part of me that is really nervous about approaching this. So I'm going to pay attention to that nervous part and maybe bring some curiosity. And I find it useful to think about a part of me as like an inner child part. But I mean, I've got a whole elementary school packed in here. It's not just one. But, they're all bothered about different things. And so I'll connect with that sort of feeling of, no, I can't go there. And begin to kind of create a relationship as I would with a child that I knew who was afraid of something. And start to go, oh, okay, well, you're not alone here. Or tell me more. Or what does that scary thing look like? And then, I might draw a big hairy monster on the page and go, wow, yeah, that does look scary. I wonder if that's really what it looks like. Or I wonder if that's just like, putting on a gorilla outfit and inside the mascot, there's this little bitty person who's too small to be on the team, but not too small for the costume.
Wow. Yeah, like feeling it, processing what's going on. Yeah, I've heard this recently. And what are we talking about here? The child within, the inner child, the shadow, and the things in your subconscious from childhood that are holding you back in adulthood. And we get the monkey chatter of, you're not worthy, you can't do that, are you kidding, blah, 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 all that stuff. So I heard when that comes up, you should say, or could say, either verbally or just to yourself, thank you for sharing. I love you. Thank you for sharing. I love you. So your monkey chatter, the child in you, is being heard. But what do you want? Why is it doing it in the first place? It just wants love. What do we all want? We all want love. So you tell yourself, your inner child, I love you.
And actually, it wants us to not receive negative attention. So it's telling us we're not doing well so that we don't get somebody outside of us actually telling us in so many words that we're not doing well. So we'll pay more attention to what we're doing, so we're doing it better.
There's so much truth in that. And why do we do it? Because fundamentally, we want to be loved, number one. But number two, we want to feel safe. So we'll do this chatter to protect ourselves from being in a situation where somebody is actually going to tell you, yeah, that sucked. Like, or you're not
really
worthy.
Yeah, really what we want is connection, and rejection dispels connection, and then we feel all alone, and that's terrible.
Yep, and unloved.
That's right, and unloved. But there's one more thing I want to add, and that is a little bit about being an anti-perfectionist, which means I've just read about a new book that's coming out called The Practice of Attention by Cody Cook Parrott. And it's all about how paying attention is itself a creative act. And you can also do things in a less than perfect way and have that be okay because you've given what feels like enough attention to whatever it was you were doing. So every time you give attention, it doesn't have to be lavishing attention. It can be a dime or a dollar. And you get to decide, how valuable is this? How much do I need to give? How much is it worth to me? What does it mean?
Very relatable as a former perfectionist, reformed perfectionist. I rode that train up until about 5-6 years ago, where just got off the train, slowly let it go, where it is, I don't want to say good enough, because that sounds negative, but
well, it does, but it's maybe sufficient.
Sufficient, yeah.
I had a friend who was recalling something that happened in high school for her, and I hope I'm not repeating the story, but it really struck me. So if I am, maybe somebody will hear it for the first time today. that she had a term paper due. She had to finish over the weekend, but there was a big camping trip with her scout troop, and she was moping around on the Friday. I'm going to have to skip the trip. I've got to do this paper. And at one point, her mom noticed that she was really getting stirred up about it. She came to my friend and she said, "You know what? You don't have to do your best every day."
Mm-hmm.
So my friend took the camping trip and remembers it as just a blast and doesn't remember anything about the term paper, but she made it through school. And so that's a new little kind of motto for me is, we get to decide how much best we want to bring.
Or how much attention we want to give something. Because if you are a perfectionist, you're giving a lot of attention, maybe more than you need to. We're out of time. This is like a wonderful conversation. Could keep going, but what just came up for me is this. Attention is intention.
Very much. Yes.
Right?
Very much. Yes. Especially when we're doing it in a mindful way with awareness. I want to invest my attention in this. I don't want to invest it that deeply in that. And then we start to really feel a great deal more agency in kind of making our way through life in ways that match our values.
Yeah. Well, there's value on your attention, i.e. there is a cost, really. And it's a cost to you if you give your attention to areas where you don't need to, be it perfectionism or people or situations. But ultimately, we can control. We can control the faucet of how much attention we want to give.
That's right. And I think it also reflects something that we often are not as convinced of as we could be, which is that we ourselves carry inherent value.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how you do it, but you come to the table of the podcast with one word, and in back of my mind, I'm like, I don't know how we're going to talk about attention for 30 minutes, but we could keep going for another 30.
We could.
It's pretty amazing.
We could. I just have one of those brains that sees connection between unlikely things.
Well, this is definitely one of them, but it's so universal and relatable. This is what you do. Robertson Art Therapy LLC.com. And if somebody's struggling with attention or just life in general, or want to see the clues within you that come out with art, reach out or even
absolutely reach out to me. You can reach me through that website.
Yeah.
Yep. I would love to have a conversation about anything that's coming up for you as you listen, anything you're curious about, anything you're wondering about. Let's talk.
And certainly others have done this, given attention to something they've created in terms of a painting or whatever it might be. We'd love to give it attention. Instant feedback, steve@gmail.com.
That's right.
Thank you for today. Wonderful conversation.
You're welcome. Thanks,
I appreciate
Steve.
it.
Have
We'll
a great
be right
week.
back.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.